welcome everyone who's joining us. I want to welcome you to the panel discussion on cultivating food security in Ukraine, a local and global perspective. I'm Meryl Sobner. I'm Assistant Director of the European Union Studies Center at the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. We take a broad view of Europe, and it's clear that events in Europe's East have an impact on the whole continent, if not the world. Our center supports events, academic workshops, and hosts visiting scholars. We seek to connect faculty and students on shared research interests across CUNY's 25 campuses, but also across the US and the world. If you'd like to learn more about our work, I'm putting in the chat our website. You can join our mailing list and or get in touch with us. We invite you all. We're having a book talk this Friday, both in person at the Graduate Center and online, and another talk at the end of the month. A book talk is on a history from World War II, and the talk is at the end of the month is with Metin Hakverde, a German member of the Bundestag, to talk about world events and the Zeitenwende. I want to say we're grateful to the CUNY Urban Food Policy Institute for co-sponsoring this event, and also to the DAAD Alumni Association and the Jean Monnet in the USA Network of European Studies Centers across the United States for helping us get out the word about it. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to our moderators, Diana Mincyte and Renata Blumberg.
Hello, I'm Diana Mincyte, and I'm thrilled to welcome everybody to this panel that features three outstanding scholars who have been doing work on food and agriculture starting before the year. So they have a long time engagement in the field and are very knowledgeable about these topics. So let me start with introductions and a brief overview of the format for the panel. Dr. Vitalii Dankevych is the Dean of the Faculty of Law, Public Administration and National Security in the Polissia National University in Ukraine, and he's joining us from Ukraine today. He's also a professor at the Department of International Economic Relations and European Integration. He has contributed to a number of projects underwritten by the World Bank and the European Union, including a recent initiative supporting transparent land governance in Ukraine. His research investigates food security and the impact of the war against Ukraine on global food markets. His recent post, co-authored with Susanne Wengle, who is also on this panel, was entitled Black Sea Blackmail, Ukrainian Food Exports in War Conditions, and that appeared on the PONRAS Eurasia page. It's an organization program for new approaches to research and security in Eurasia. You can see in the chat, some of these publication lists will be appearing as well with recent publications, especially if these relate to today's topic. Welcome everybody to follow through and read more. Dr. Natalia Mamonova is a senior researcher at the Institute for Rural and Regional Research, RURALIS, in Trondheim, Norway, and the coordinator of the European team of the Emancipatory Rural Politics Initiative. She studies food sovereignty, agrarian transformation, civil society, and right-wing populism in the post-socialist countryside. Her current research is focused on the impact of the war in Ukraine on the Ukrainian and the world's food systems. She recently published a terrific paper in the Journal of Peasant Studies entitled Food Sovereignty and Solidarity Initiatives in Rural Ukraine During the War. Our next presenter is Dr. Susanne Wengle. She's a Nancy Drew Associate Professor of Political Science at the University of Notre in the US. Her research examines Eurasian agriculture and food systems and other aspects of the post-Soviet transformation, including the creation of energy markets, the effects of sanctions, which are very pertinent to the current situation, welfare reforms, and the politics of expertise. Her recent book, Black Earth, White Bread, is an interdisciplinary history of the Soviet and Russian agriculture and food systems that documents interactions between political projects, technological improvements, and quotidian practices. She recently co-authored an article with Vitalii Dankevych, introduced before, entitled "Ukrainian Farms Feed Europe and China. Russia wants to change that." And it came out in the Washington Post. My colleague Renata Blumberg will be. We are both co-moderating this panel. She is an associate professor in the Department of Nutrition and Food Studies at Montclair State University. She researches the geographies of food systems in the US and Europe. Her new research project focuses on critical dietetics and feminist pedagogies. Her most recent paper, Engendering European Alternative Food Networks Through Counter Topographies, Perspectives from Latvia, was published in the journal Anthropology of Food. And I'm Diana Mincyte. I'm currently an associate professor of sociology at the City University of New York. I'm also an associate editor of the journal Environmental Studies and Sciences. My research revolves about questions of vernacular sustainability, ideologies and practices of self-reliance in agriculture and gender, as well as food and energy nexus within the Baltic region in particular, but also in the United States. I co-authored a piece that is relevant for this topic in Gastronomic on the war in Ukraine and its emphasis on East European food security and situation with a refugee crisis. So on to the format. Please note that the panel is being recorded, and adjust your settings accordingly. We ask to keep your microphones muted, and we will leave 15-20 minutes at the end for general discussion, and we encourage everybody to post questions in advance as we hear the discussion in the chat, and we will return and bring these questions back at the very end. So without further ado, let me start with the very first question, and that pertains to the in the context of the spring coming in and the questions of what to grow next year and how what is happening on the ground in Ukraine. This question is about the challenges that Ukrainian farmers are facing as they prepare for this year's season. What are these challenges? And I will hand it over to presenters.
Well, thank you everyone for attending, and thank you Renata and Diana and Meryl for bringing us together to talk about this important topic. I'm happy to see so many people from all over the world, because we will see that this is very much a global topic. So let me get to the first question that you actually asked. So what challenges are Ukrainian farmers facing this year? I want to go back to last year, because the challenges that they were facing last year are a good indicator for what they will face this year, unfortunately. So all Ukrainian farms were hit very hard by the war, and there were really too many factors to go into details. There were many factors that made farming really, really difficult in Ukraine. So let me just briefly mention a few, especially in the occupied areas. Fields were just simply inaccessible. Sometimes there were mines in fields, so it was dangerous to field. Sometimes the Russian forces had stolen machinery, or they had burned the crops in the fall. And then a widespread problem was also that storage and transport infrastructure was damaged for farming. And fuel was expensive. The energy grid was under siege. So all of these things contributed to making farming difficult. Perhaps the biggest problem was the Russian naval blockade of the Black Sea ports. So it made it impossible for Ukraine to export grain. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but Ukrainian farming is very export dependent. So the blockade, literally in the 6 months at the beginning of the war, just stopped Ukrainian grain from leaving the country, and the grain was piling up in Ukraine, which meant that prices dropped, which meant that farmers could sort of barely get anything for selling their grain. So prices dropped domestically while grain prices were rising globally in the first few months of 2022. So with the negotiation of the grain corridor, the situation improved a little bit for Ukrainian farms. So Ukrainian farms were able to export their grain under the agreement that was reached in July. And so this is now the context that Ukrainian farmers face this year. So I think the overwhelming challenge is a great deal of uncertainty about all these things, about transport, storage, export, prices of imports, and so on. So and all this uncertainty makes it incredibly hard for farmers to plan and to know how to move forward. In addition, farmers also ended up what is called winterizing corn. So they actually left some crops on the fields in the fall. So they now have to harvest that before they can plant again. Since the export routes are blocked, some Ukrainian farmers are exploring alternative routes to get grain out of Ukraine, including roads and train to Europe. But these things are very costly and require a lot of investment. So I want to, sort of leave it at here, leave it at this, and maybe hand over the floor to Vitalii and Natalia if they want to add anything to this sort of general picture of quite significant challenges.
Yes, colleagues, I can add some information. When we speak about this challenge, we need to think that our producers try to find a way and try to diversify their production, because it's very important, because all our production was oriented to export, and when it stopped, all our production tried to diversify their structure. Now we can find it in sowing structure, and they try to organize processing of these products and try to organize another logistic way. So we speak about period when we try to diversify our agrarian business, period when we try to find new partners in different part of water, and this is very, it was in a very short time. That is why not all our farmers and big companies can find all this logistic way, because we have harvest from 2021, harvest from 2022, and we don't have opportunity how to export all this harvest. So it was a very big problem in Ukraine, what to do with this harvest, and it was a very big problem in a lot of countries in Asia and Africa, where to find this harvest when we speak about maize, when we speak about wheat and other crops from Ukraine.
Natalia, do you have thoughts on small farmers versus large farmers? I feel like I've talked mostly about the large farmers because they have been the focus of our current project, but perhaps you want to just add a qualifier.
Yeah, well, as you know, or if you don't know that, the Ukrainian agricultural structure, agrarian structure, actually consists of two different modes of production: a large industrial, almost often export-oriented agriculture, and small-scale, medium-scale farming that is primarily oriented on domestic market and self-sufficiency in food. And I usually look at the small-scale farmers in my research. So in terms of how they were impacted in their farming practices and their production, and what challenges they face. They face with the similar challenges as the large ones as well. They also had problems with an infrastructure, with an destruction of the energy infrastructure, with all these crimes that taking place on agricultural fields, and they had to do with their scarcity of the fuel and problems with supply of seeds and fertilizers, especially in the beginning of the war. Although they managed to solve the situation in slightly different ways than the large business did, and they mostly relied on mutual help and reciprocity and help each other. And even there are such cases in some informants, and they were sharing the stories that farmers had to use a horse-driven transport to plug the lands because there was no fuels. They have, what's interesting also to notice, I think, small-scale farmers, they have cultivated even those land, all the land that they had, that available, that are outside of an active military operations, and but also they managed to find the land that was not cultivated before and cultivated it because they needed to produce food to feed their families and the population of Ukraine for the coming season and the season to go. So there is a lot of challenges that the small-scale farmers sharing with the large ones, and but they solve that a little bit different ways. And of course, they are less oriented on exports, so they didn't have that big issue as a big business had with a blockade of the Black Sea ports and exports and infrastructure and facilities.
Thank you. Many in this audience will have heard about solidarity initiatives and networks ensuring food security in Ukraine. Can you describe them? How do they work? And I think, Natalia, you'd be the person to answer this question.
Yeah, thank you. Well, there was the article that Diana was mentioned, and that was published in Journal of Peasant Studies. It was actually dealing with this solidarity initiatives in rural Ukraine during the first year of the war. I was not able to go to the field, so my primary data come from the interviews with different representatives of agricultural and rural areas of Ukraine, and based on that data, I was able to write a paper. And they all informants, and they were telling that their solidarity and mutual support and collective action have significantly increased in the beginning of the war. And this is not surprisingly, because in any conflict settings, and there people have to rely on their internal networks and the social networks, and that's how the people survive. And this also what's happening in Ukraine, and this is what helped Ukrainian farmers, both small and big, also to manage through this challenging year. And and it's not only about this support in regards to the production and distribution of the food, but also in regards to helping the Ukrainian army, for example. There is a lot of initiatives when the small farmers, as well as the big corporations, they donate food to the needs of Ukrainian army. They also donate food, collect in their settlements, and then donate the food to feed the internally displaced people. Those people who left the war zones, and those people also who left the cities, because the cities, as we know, are targeted by Russian air attacks, and while the countryside is significantly more secure in this case. So a lot of urban dwellers moved to the countryside. And also there is a lot of solidarity and mutual help is taking place in regard to those who to receive these internally displaced people, to find them a place to stay. They often stay at the farms or the rural house. There is a lot of abandoned and rural houses in Ukraine, and I came across different examples when the rural communities renovating their houses to receive the newcomers. So there's quite a significant boost of all these solidarity initiatives, and I argue that this leads to development of the vibrant and strong civil society in the countryside, which is important for food sovereignty movement and to defend the rights of smallholders in the future that Ukraine will face. And yes, so that's very interesting developments is taking place. So some activists are telling me that of course the war brought a lot of tragedies and pain and suffering to the Ukrainian population, but at the same time it provoked something good in the society, and it provokes this in solidarity and patriotism, and people are able to overcome their divisions and to work together and to create something from nothing. And that's how I think they see it as a good development.
Thank you. Did the other panelists want to chime in, or? We can go to the next question then.
I will just comment on how important that topic that Natalia just covered is also from the perspective of food systems elsewhere. There is all this talk about how do we build more sustainable food economies, and there is all this kind of efforts to think about these direct farm-to-table initiatives, and seeing that unfold in the conditions of war in places that tend to be seen as not having particularly civic engagement kind of and grassroots movements and social movements in general, is really an interesting, at least, but also possibly informative in how these can be organized and evolved. Now on to the next question, which is probably somewhat related to this one. The question is, what has been your biggest surprise about how the farmers, but also the larger Ukrainian agro-food systems responded to the war?
Thank you for this question. I tried to give you answer. And when we speak about this question, and if we analyze period of 1 year, because almost 1 year we have this war, we need to understand that this is not military war. We speak about hybrid war. And now when we speak about food security, when we speak about agriculture, we need to understand that Russian Federation tried to destroy our economy. They tried to destroy our agrarian sector, and they use everything what they have to destroy our logistic, to blockade our Black Sea, and to destroy all infrastructure which we have in agriculture, because they understand that agriculture is very important for our economy, because almost 80% of our revenue money we take from agriculture. So when we speak about some surprise or not surprise, when we speak about real phase of this war, it's a hybrid war. It's economy, it's agrarian, it's military, it's propaganda war. We need to understand. And now all our farmers and small farmers, big holdings, and all people in agriculture understand that they have their own front, and all people in Ukraine from different parts of and spheres of business now in this war, and they fight for their own business, for their own farms, for their own land. So first surprise that we don't speak about traditional war when one military people fight from another. We speak about hybrid war. Another, it's about this hybrid war. What was surprised that all our exports stop. I think it was idea from Russian Federation to stop our export, because they understand that export is very important for economy. And when we speak about main sphere of our export, we speak about agriculture. So we have a lot of period when everything stopped, and it was a big problem for farmers, for big holdings, because a lot of them, they live only with money which they have from agrarian sector. They produce some crops, they produce some food export, and have money for their family, for budget, and for all economy. So another surprise, it was that for some period we have stopping of our all export. It was terrible, but we try to find way from this situation. When we speak about another highlights or another effect which we find, it's a very big cooperation. When we speak about our small farmer, we don't have traditional of cooperation, because all our farmers, they live and organize their business alone. It's maybe not good, but we have such structure. But this war showed that all our farmers can cooperate. They can help each other, and this war showed that when we speak about small farmers, when we speak about small agriculture producers, they give a lot for our armed force. They give a lot for people who protect our territory. They give a lot of their tracks and machinery to protect their territory. And we have a lot of cases when they give all their vegetables, for example, for people who protect this territory. And even now you can find in internet and in Ukraine a lot of such cards. And in these cards you can find our Ukraine track with our flag and Russian military machine. So our farmers, it's like men who help our military people in territory which was free from Russian military. They tried to take all machinery and give this machinery to our military people, and you can find a lot of such story. It was very dangerous because a lot of these farmers die, but we have such situation, and it helps a lot for our people, for our military people, because we don't have a lot of weapon, we don't have a lot of modern weapon which we need now. When we speak about another surprise which we have, we need to speak that in a very short period we try to diversify our logistic system, because for a long period all our logistic system, when we speak about agrarian export, we use only Black Sea, and maybe using 1 month we diversify our logistic system. We try to use our cooperation with European partners, and even now we have some alternative way how to export products from Ukraine to European countries. And even now some of you ask about why we don't use another seaport in another country. We use it now, but it was very difficult because because we need a lot of time to organize all this logistic system, because logistic system in Ukraine, for example, railway station, and in European Union, it's different. And for very short time, we try to make a lot of change in this way. And now our farmers try to find another partner in European Union. They try to organize processing in our country, and then they export not raw materials, but products with added value. So it's very important. So it's the main surprise, but maybe not surprise, but situation which we have in these conditions. And this war shows that we need to live in modern time. We need to diversify all our activity, because everything change very quickly, and we need to speak not about months. We need to speak and prognose situation for some days. So it's the main surprise and challenge which now we have in our agrarian sector.
Thank you. This is quite eye-opening. If nobody has additional comments,
I will just add just a few words. You know, one thing that occurred to me that maybe I should have mentioned at the beginning, that maybe most of the audience knows, but maybe not everyone is fully aware of this, is that Ukraine has an incredibly suitable climate and fertile soils for agriculture. In the 19th century, Ukraine was producing most of the Russian Empire's grain and was feeding European cities while they're industrializing. So Ukraine has an incredible soil and climate and long growing seasons and the right moisture, et cetera, et cetera. So that's really important. So I think to actually answer the question, what surprised me is that the resilience, I think, of Ukrainian farmers of all types, and their sort of ingenuity in addressing challenges, and Vitalii and Natalia have spoken, eloquently to how exactly they did this, and finding new partners, finding new ways to export, finding new crops, and so on. But I think it's important to remember that Ukraine is an incredibly fertile country, and farmers in Ukraine are continuing to grow despite these very, very existential threats to the security and to the way they have been growing crops so far. Thanks.
I maybe add a little bit also to this picture, if I may, right? Okay, so to me, that when Vitalii showed that postcard with the tractor dragging the tank, and I thought that what I think is important to mention, that the farmers, Ukrainian farmers, they became the heroes of the war. And it's not only because they produce the food, but also because they help army and they help the people in their communities and beyond to survive the challenges of the war. But it's interesting this farmers' patriotism that leads to the societal recognition of their bravery and them as war heroes, also to lead to some new development in the discourse and hopefully in the practice, because in Ukrainian politics and also in the societal perceptions of what is a future and progressive agriculture, is often the industrial agriculture is seen as a way forward, this neoliberal agricultural model. And the small-scale farming are usually seen as a rather backward, less efficient, and can be a subsidiary, but not the main actors in guaranteeing Ukrainian food security. But what the war has shown is that those small-scale and medium-scale farmers are those who feed the country, actually. And that discourse about the private farming gets to the direction that this is how the Ukraine should develop in the future, and this is what the model should be put forward. And it's this discourse not happening among farmers themselves or politicians, but also a lot of consumers and just ordinary people start talking about that. And I think it's a very important development, because before the war, the recognition of the small-scale private farming as a sustainable agriculture model was there, but it was rather a marginal discourse. But now this discourse, and because of the war, became stronger and stronger. And in the Ukrainian social movements and farmer movements, those who are oriented and supporting the small-scale and medium farmers in Ukraine, they're trying to bring their agenda to the government and make that the voice of the farmers is heard at all levels, and that they would be recognized as the future of Ukrainian domestic food security, at least. Yes.
Thank you. That connects really well with the next question on EU accession, which deals very much with the future. While there's a lot of uncertainty about this topic right now, how are closer ties with the EU and the potential accession to the EU and the common agricultural policy, the significant European Union subsidy system, how is that changing agro-food systems in Ukraine today? And I think Vitalii.
Yes, I can ask for this question. When we speak about situation which we have now in Ukraine, we need to understand that in Ukraine for a lot of period we have some balance, and we discuss about this balance, about European model when we speak about small farmers and about agrarian holdings which we have in Ukraine. It's maybe Brazil model. And it was discussion what model is better for Ukraine. When we speak about small farmers, they are better for ecology, they better for social development because they work in local territory, they have diversified production, they have crop production and livestock, and it's very good business for local development. When we speak about agrarian holdings, I think you know that in Ukraine we have the biggest agrarian company in the world. We speak about Kernel, we speak about NHP and another big holdings, and we speak about Land Bank, more than 600,000 hectares. It's a very big company, and but when we speak about the effect, we speak only about economy effect, because for ecology and for social effect, sometimes they are not very good. And now it's a discussion, what model better? For a longer period, this discussion was very active, and it was very difficult to find answer, because when we speak that Ukraine produce the main crops in the world, when we speak about our export position, we need to understand that everything we have, because we have all this agrarian holding. But now this war shows that it's very important to diversify agrarian business. It's very important to give good opportunity not only to big producers, but to small producers. To this man, which I show in this picture, as small producers, farmers who live in local territory and who help people who help to protect their own village, their own land, and with people who live in this territory. And it's very important in our nowadays situation, because when we speak about our future, all people think that when we speak about future of Ukraine, we speak about European integration. We speak about integration to European Union, and in this way we need to use model which are very successful in European Union. We speak about farmers, we speak about not very big business, because this business is better for ecology, this business better for economic effect, and it's good for social sphere. So we need to adaptate our agrarian sphere, and this war, it's not correct to say, but it's help to make some balance between very big producer and small producer. And even now we have some support from different countries. And when we speak about this support from European Union, this support for small farmers, because this model, when we speak about small farmers, it's better to European, and it will better for Ukraine when we speak about our integration of our country and integration of our agrarian sector, because we need to integrate it to European Union. And when we speak about this integration, we need to speak about European market. Ukraine now tried to diversify their logistic way. We tried to diversify our trade partner, and now we try to find our partner in European market. Speaking about our company, we need to understand that a lot of our companies start this process maybe 10 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, and now we produce a lot of products which have all European standards. We export this product to European market, and now in European market you can find a lot of products from Ukraine. When we speak about future, we need to speak about processing of product, because now in Ukraine we produce a lot of raw material, and this war shows that this strategy is not very good. We need to organize processing in Ukraine and then export this finished product to European Union and another country in the world. Maybe my colleagues can add something.
I think we're rapidly running out of time. I want to let Renata move on to the next question, since you answered this one quite comprehensively.
Excellent. I'll just move on, if that's okay. we would like to ask that question about the project that you told us about, that you're all collaborating on corn politics and corn growing in Ukraine. For the audiences in the US, corn is a quintessential commodity in the US. Entire food system is built on corn from meat industry to any kind of product you can find in the supermarket shelves, and we don't necessarily think of European producers of corn, of which Ukraine is very important. So as you talk a little bit about this project, we would like to ask you to think a little bit more in terms of the impact on the global markets and connections to this kind of global perspective as well. So the floor is yours.
Yeah, I'll just briefly summarize our project. So I actually been fascinated with Ukrainian corn for some time, because I previously had done research on the Soviet history, and corn was an interesting part of that, and then the post-Soviet history of Russian agriculture, and wheat is really the big commodity in Russia. And I sort of saw Ukrainian wheat statistics, or wheat was like important and continues to be important, but Ukraine really shifted to corn. So Ukraine experiences incredible corn boom, and if you just look at the data, it's just sort of astonishing just how much more corn Ukraine started producing. The sort of production yields and area and exports, it looked like a sort of wholesale transformation. So I actually asked Natalia to work together on this, and then we finally started working after the war, and by that time Vitalii had joined. And so we're kind of looking at two things in this project. One is the sort of corn boom that happened over the last 10-15 years. And then what happened to this corn during the war? That's sort of second element. And the interesting part is exactly sort of the global connection of corn, because it actually helped Ukraine sort of reorient its rural sector from basically sort of feeding itself and feeding a little bit its neighbors. It used to sort of export a little bit of agriculture to Belarus before this corn boom and before the agricultural boom, whereas now Ukraine really feeds the world. A lot of grain goes to Egypt, Turkey, and many other countries. So corn is really essential for these sort of global connections of the Ukrainian food system. And so what is interesting again about this is that the naval blockade basically just interrupted that really radically, and sort of we argue that this shows the sort of fragility of an export-oriented monocrop-based rural sector, where a lot of people before the war weren't even thinking about this kind of event. It really sort of came as a surprise, and there's a lot of really important work on the power of transnational companies, and they of course are really important in this kind of export-oriented sector. But we are sort of bringing the war to the story. So maybe I'll let Natalia and Vitalii speak to sort of the broader question on what the war tells us about Ukraine and global food security, which I think is a question that is really quite important at this time.
Shall I start, then Vitalii add? Yeah, so that's actually the whole corn project is a fascinating thing, because it gives us an opportunity to look at the globalized neoliberal agricultural model through the one commodity, and to explore like how that commodity became globalized and how it became one of the key export commodities, and then those features of that made corn how we call it, cash cow of multinational corporations working in Ukraine, it became actually the burden of, especially during the first half a year when there was a blockade of the Black Sea ports. And we looked at it from different angles, from the production to storage to the distribution, sales, and their further sowing plants and of Ukrainian corn producers. And we saw a lot of changes that already my colleagues have mentioned in regards to their situation in Ukrainian agriculture in general, but we looked at like for the corn particularly, and how the farmers start changing their sowing plans for the next season, because they don't want to rely on corn, which is a heavy and difficult to transport and store crop, and they prefer to have other crops that also they can sell the domestic markets in a case if there would be again problems and distortions with the international food trade. And also they diversify. What Vitalii mentioned, it's a very important transformation that we see in Ukrainian agriculture, and those corporations that used to be oriented only on producing corn for export as a raw material, they start looking for the new ways to produce either other crops or other more niche commodities, or they think what to do with the corn, maybe to develop their biofuel production or some deep processing of this crop. But at the same time, even though these companies are changing their methods and their practices, we concluded that corn, wheat, and sunflower, they will be still their main export commodities of Ukraine. So Ukrainian business will not give up on those, because this is the main revenues, not only to the business, but to the budget of Ukraine, which is important for the post-war recovery and reconstruction of the country. And we also talked about the theories of the which agricultural or agrarian, if you go deeper, model would feed the world and more resilient in the context of their shocks, disturbances. And we saw that COVID pandemic has serious impact on this neoliberal agricultural value chain. And in the beginning of pandemic, we saw the empty shelves in supermarkets while the farmers had to dump their food. And then it was a very clear indicator that this globalized agricultural model is not flexible enough and is not sustainable in context of the shocks and disturbances. And the war in Ukraine showed it again. So if you talk about the global impact of the war and how it affected the food systems, it shows that we need to rethink our food system and to give also more space to the localized food systems that are more stable and flexible in the context of the crisis, war, or other disasters. And so we can't, the whole world can't rely only on globalized food exports, and this is a good indication, I think, unfortunately. Yeah.
When we speak about corn, I want to add, because this topic is very interesting and very important. So corn was a crop which gives money for our budget. It was before war, and now when we speak about nowadays, when we analyze all our agrarian export, we can find first position, and this position belongs to corn. It crops which give money for our budget. But this war makes some changes in situation when we speak about some processing with this crop, some structure and some activities which now we have. When we speak about corn, some our companies try to find way how to organize processing of this crop. It's not very easily, because we need to invest a lot of money and we need some period. It's very difficult to organize all this in short time, but a lot of our company try to do this. Another way, a lot of our farmers find different situation with saving corn. Even now in Ukraine, you can find maybe some not usual situation in a lot of our fields. Even nowadays in winter, you can find corn, because I think maybe 40% of our farmers decide not to harvesting corn because it's too expensive to save it, and we have a problem with electricity. That is why even now, when I move from Zhytomyr to another part of our country, I can find a lot of fields in snow, but with corn. In technology, it's not a very big problem, because we have new seeds of corn, and we can organize harvesting later when we have such opportunity. But a lot of farmers have their corn in their fields. So every day situation is changed, and when we speak about corn, in first situation, when we speak about in the beginning of the war, it was a very big problem when we speak about corn, because our farmers don't have any opportunity to save it. They have harvest of corn from 2021, then from 2022, and it was a very big problem for our agrarian sector. But it was but we live in global world. That is why when we speak about our grain corridor, when we speak about our export, a lot of countries in the world need our corn. That is why a lot of countries collaborate. We have a lot of different initiatives from different countries, and then we start our grain corridor, we start export our corn to another country, and it was very helpful for our farmers and for all people in different countries in the world who need our corn, because we one of the biggest producer of this crop. So it's little information. When we speak about some topic, we need, I think, not only 1 hour, we need such topic and such discussion about corn, for example, because Ukraine is one of the biggest producer of corn, and we need discuss a lot of sides when we speak about this crop.
Thank you so much, Vitalii and the other panelists. So now we'd like to move on to the question and answer section of the panel. And I'll start off with the first question that was asked a while ago about the logistical challenges related to rerouting transportation. Why exactly, like what are specific reasons why Ukraine can't reroute its exports through Mediterranean ports, for example? And Vitalii, I guess maybe you're the best person to answer that.
Yes, I can answer for this question, and I try to answer for it. When we speak about our logistic way, and when we speak about our export, for example, we built this logistic way maybe for 10, maybe for more years. We invest a lot of money for infrastructure. We invest a lot of money for facilities for saving our crops. And when we speak about nowadays, we have such situation. To diversify our logistic system, we need a lot of time and we need a lot of money. Why it's very difficult when we speak about another port? The main difficult because we have different railway stations in Ukraine and in European Union. So we need to move our corn, for example, from one part of Ukraine to a border of European Union, then organize some operation, then use railway in Europe, and only then move to another port. And we speak about money. When we speak about our Black Sea and logistic which we have, it's the main cheapest logistic. So a lot of company use this logistic. Almost all agrarian business use ports of Black Sea. And when we speak about Black Sea, we speak about 95% of our agrarian export. So in very short time, it's impossible to diversify this logistic system. impossible for money, impossible for infrastructure, and impossible for short time.
Maybe I can just add a 10-second comment. Grain and corn in particular are quite heavy, right? And it's actually, Ukraine was actually struggling with the sort of domestic infrastructure of getting these grains to its ports, but over the last 10-15 years, the large companies have invested in actually river transport and train transport, but it was all organized towards ports because, in particular, because Ukraine is reaching global markets, right? And the trains and the roads that face Europe were just less developed, right? The Vitalii mentioned this, but I just want to add again that the gauge of the old Soviet train tracks and the European train tracks are different, right? So that means actually that there have to be people who actually load the really heavy grain from one train cart into another, and so that is sort of how this sort of expensive reorientation looks like in reality. Thanks.
Thank you. We are having questions piling up, so we'll start combining some of them, and brief responses would be appreciated to also get more questions in. So I'm combining questions about the extent of disruptions and what is happening with these disruptions in terms of, first of all, have there been reports of famine and or severe insecurity? Have we had these reports across Ukraine? And second question is land property and land titling, and especially in the context of occupied territories, there have been reports of abandoned, what's considered abandoned, which is just many times killed or owners left. What happens to these lands in the occupied territories? And that's a question by Don van Atta. And are there reports of these land seizures and taking over the property titling and in there as well? So who would like to jump in? We'll continue.
Maybe I get us started, but Vitalii can add detail. There are definitely reports of stolen land and occupied land in the occupied territory, and that has actually been the case for some time. I believe even before the war. I think it's extremely difficult to know the extent of this. So any detail that Vitalii can add is sort of important here.
Thank you. When we speak about this question, we don't have a lot of information, but we communicate with farmers, we communicate with people from occupied territory, and we know information from this territory. First of all, when we speak about strategy of Russian Federation, when they occupied new territories, they tried to take from this territory everything. When we speak about agriculture, they tried to take all agriculture machinery from this territory. Then they tried to take all harvest. When we speak about wheat, maize, we have a fact that they stolen all our crops from this territory. When we speak about agricultural land, now it's impossible to stolen this land, but we have a lot of cases when they occupied territory and they occupied agrarian company. They occupied this agrarian company and they organized some, I don't know how to correct it, say some tax system. So these farmers in occupied territory paid some tax, I don't know how to say this tax, for this new government, and sometimes they pay maybe half of all their profits, sometimes they pay all their profits, so they take everything in these farmers, and we have a lot of such cases, and it's a very big problem, because when we speak about occupied territory, which we have now, in a lot of this territory, we have a lot of very good agrarian business. We speak about our agrarian black soil, chernozem, and now it's impossible to use it. And now a lot of farmers in this territory, they don't have a future because they don't have the equipments, they don't have money for next sowing company, and sometimes they don't have opportunity to move this territory, because when we speak about farmers and agrarian producer, they stay for last period in their territory and try to save their land, their equipment, because when we speak about agrarian business, it's everything which they have, it's their land, equipment, and it's impossible to take all this and to move to another territory. So this problem is very big, and they stolen not only some big track or something else, they take everything. And in territory which now we control, we find place without anything. So they move, and it's I don't know how to explain this situation, but they destroyed or take everything which we have in this territory.
Thank you. So now moving on to a different impact of the war, immigration.
I'm sorry, I'm very sorry for interrupting you, because like the first question was asked and we somehow ignored it. There was a question that whether it's some issues with the food supply in Ukraine as a result of the war, if there is a famine as reported. And maybe I can add a few words on that.
Go ahead. And there was also a question about like international organizations, are they helping or not? Which one?
Okay, I can also add to that. Well, in terms of famine and the serious food insecurity, Vitalii, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it is the case of in Ukraine right now, because I think every in rural areas there's always the land available, even a small plot around the household that people cultivate with some basic stuff food like potatoes, carrots, and cabbage. And my family in Ukraine, they start cultivating all the land on their countryside, country house and a dacha place, and with some basic food. And that's how they, in Soviet times, how their society used to survive in the periods of their interruptions in food supply or insufficient food supply in the Soviet time, and during the post-socialist, when the Soviet Union collapsed, there was a serious crisis. There also people get more relied on this self-food provisioning on their little land plots around. In urban areas where the people don't have the access to the land, there is different initiatives taking place, and I'd like to mention the Victory Gardens initiative, which became quite popular initiative and successful as well. It was largely influenced by the Victory Garden movement in Western countries during the First and Second World War, where the people were encouraged to grow the food everywhere they can, and this is also taking place in Ukraine these days, and urban dwellers, they get support and with seedlings and some other resources and the knowledge to set the Victory Garden in even on their balconies or on the roofs of their buildings or in local parks, and it is taking place, and it's not only as a source of fresh food, which is very important and contributes to this food security during the war, but also it's as a way to boost their morale and to have this this hope for the better, hope for the victory, that they together are doing something good, and they not on the food produced in such gardens and not is not only consumed by the producers, but they also share it within communities, and to the armies, and to the internally displaced people. So there's a lot of, and it's one of the examples how these grassroots initiatives, also with the support of the government in some cases, sometimes without, taking place in Ukraine, and help people to find, to maintain their subsistence.
And I want to add my own experience when we speak about food security and when we speak about beginning of the war. So when we speak about first day of the war, all people moved to supermarket and tried to buy some food because it was like a panic, because for a lot of people it was, they don't know about this war, they don't expect it, and all people moved to supermarket, tried to take all food because they don't know about their future. So I did the same, but I don't have luck in it, because in first day in supermarket it was lack of all, lack of bread, lack of milk and everything else. I think in second day of war we have the same situation, maybe in third day the same. We have a problem with bread, we have a problem with another product, but when we speak about maybe 5 days, our supermarkets try to diversify their channel, they try to diversify their logistic, and when we speak about domestic market, everything was good. If you have money, you can buy all product. When we speak about period later, a lot of product move from European Union in our supermarket. Even now you can find a lot of products from Ukraine and a lot of products from European Union. So today, if you have money, it's not a problem to buy everything which you need for your family. But another question about money. I agree with Natalia that in rural territory, people have their own land, they can produce something, but in big cities now, for people which don't have enough money, sometimes it's a problem, because when we speak about our price, we have change in this price policy, and now we can find a lot of people who don't have opportunity to buy even some food. It's not critical, but we have such situation. The main critical situation in occupied territory, because in this occupied territory we don't have logistic. Russian Federation destroyed everything which they can, and in this occupied territory, even in some place, we have humanitarian crisis when we speak about food, when we speak about water, and when we speak about infrastructure for normal living for people in this territory. So in some place, it's a very big problem nowadays.
Okay, thank you. So now I'm going to move on to the question about emigration, and we just asked the panelists to keep your responses brief so we can get on to the other questions. So many Ukrainians have left the country since the war started. How has immigration affected the food market and farming in Ukraine?
I want to start with the general picture and then ask Natalia and Vitalii to fill in. I mean, there's sort of the general picture that the modernized large-scale agriculture actually relies more on machine and less on labor. That said, the machines still have to be operated by people who know those machines, right? And so if there's specialized farm workers that are drafted into the army, that can be quite detrimental because they're really hard to replace, right? And then on the other hand, the small scale farming is quite labor intensive, and actually a lot of women have left in some places, and often women play an important role. So those are sort of the general answers, right? Labor is certainly out migration on the one hand, but also men who are serving in the military are certainly greatly missed in many ways. Vitalii and Natalia, do you guys want to add to this?
Yes, I agree with you. When we speak about small farmers, for some of them, this war is critical because when we speak about small farmers, if only one man from this company move to the war or migrate to another part of Ukraine or to another country, for this farm, it's critical because sometimes when we speak about one farm, it's only one family or two people, so it's critical. When we speak about big business, and big agrarian holdings, sometimes it's even critical too, because we speak about operator of tracks, we speak about mechanizator, and now a lot of them in our military force, a lot of them fight for our land, and even now for them it's a very big problem. When we speak about some territory which was occupied, we speak about Kiev region, we speak about Chernihiv, Sumy, Kharkiv region. We need to understand that a lot of people, a lot of agrarian people move from this territory, and even now it's very dangerous to operate in this territory. So when we speak about agrarian business and when we speak about track operator, it's very dangerous now, because Russian Federation, as I told, they organize hybrid war. They fight not only with our military people, they fight with our farmers. We have a lot of agriculture land, which meaning now, and when we speak about this sowing company, almost every day we find news from fields, and it's news about agrarian tracks which destroyed in this means. So now it's very dangerous profession when we speak about agriculture, when we speak about operation in our fields, because Russian Federation uses this technology. They try to destroy not only our military system, not only our economy system, but our agriculture system. So when we speak about future sowing company, I think it will be not very easily. And in aspect of people, I think it will be not very easily to find people too.
Okay, excellent. So I will move to the question of livestock. And Elizabeth Dunn asked us about more specifically dairy and pork industries and what is happening in them. And Brenda Biddle asked a really great question about your corn project, is whether the corn that is produced in Ukraine also is feeding these industries, and what are the relationships and consequences of the war in that sense.
Shall I try to answer, and you colleagues will help me? So about the livestock and poultry, well, it's also, of course, affected by the war, and there were cases, and when there was one of the informant with whom I had an interview. She was telling that one of the biggest, Vitalii, help me with the name, perhaps you will come up with it. The biggest poultry farm in Europe had to select all their chicken because their air bomb fell onto the energy the station nearby, and the factory is the biggest in Ukraine. There's a 4 million, I think, chicken there. Was it was without electricity, so they have to utilize the bodies as soon as possible, otherwise it would be an environmental disaster. And this happens in other parts of in the livestock as well. And what happening also, what we notice, that quite often those companies, they in order to prevent this environmental problems, or also this problems with not able to use the channels of distribution of the meat and the poultry, and they give away their products to the local communities, to the army, as a part of their charity initiatives. There are the donations, and they have the difficulties with functioning as well. And that's also the reason is why their domestic demand for corn is not sufficient in comparison with the peacetime, because they those animal farms, that they are not also functioning well in the wartime. And what was the second one question?
More about the corn and
about the corn. Yes, so there's also we were asking ourselves this question: how the corn that Ukraine produces is used, and also within the country, and exported, because there's different information. There is no clear statistics and which share and how. There like it reflects the global trade of the corn. Also, I think there was something like 60% goes to the feed, 30% goes to food, and the remaining goes to the biofuel and other use of the corn. The same in Ukraine as well. Also within the country, although the biofuel energy is not so developed, but it's hopefully growing. So yes, that's what I can say. You have comments?
I can add some information. Speaking about livestock production, why today we speak only about crop production, because speaking about Ukraine, I think we have some disbalance when we speak about our agrarian sector. We need to analyze that crop production, it's like 70% of our agrarian sector, and only maybe 30% it's livestock production. And when we speak about our livestock production, we speak about poultry industry. We need to understand that Russian Federation tried to destroy our poultry industry too, but they try not to destroy it. But when we speak about military actions, a lot of our poultry farm used like a base for military tanks and a base for military, saving some military objects, because it's very good place for safe. That is why when we have military fight, a lot of this industry, a lot of these buildings and construction were destroyed. And it was a very big problem. Another situation when we speak about the biggest company which specialize in poultry production, we need to understand that they situated in territory which for some period we don't control. We speak about Kherson region, we speak about Chernihiv, we speak about Kharkiv, and in this territory we lost a lot of our poultry, because poultry is very developed in Ukraine. We organize it for our domestic needs, and we organize very good export of it. But now we have a lot of losses, and I think it's problem, because even when we analyze about corn, so logical was question, we need to organize processing and use this corn for our poultry, for example. But a lot of poultry industry now destroyed, and we have changes in the price for eggs, for example, and for meat. Even in Ukraine we have change, and even now for some people it's not very easily to buy eggs and meat, because we have change in price, and this change is not very good for our people.
Okay, thank you so much. This would like, unfortunately, to to finish our formal part of the panel with asking a question if our panelists have any links and resources they could share where the audience members can contribute, help, and or follow the work that is done, and contribute to communities, donate to the communities that are dealing and working hard to address these issues of food security in Ukraine, and also any support venues are that they can direct their resources to, and follow your research as well. So if you could see in the chat, post a couple of links in the chat if you had sent that support. some of the panelists agreed to stay for a few more minutes to answer questions and in an informal way, but we will finish the recording and that will be the end of this great panel, and hopefully to see everyone in the future, as well as in the upcoming events at the European Studies Center at CUNY. That is our main hope. As I see numbers dwindling, we can continue the conversation, but this is the formal end of the panel. Thank you for everybody's attention and participation, and especially thank you to the panelists for their time and effort.